Hello and welcome to Future Imperfect. I'm your host, Admiral Phillips, and joining me again from this side of the galaxy this time is Captain Dodd.
Hey, welcome back, Steve. Gotta say, it's always good to be back here on the deck of the Future Imperfect, and we got a lot to actually talk about this week.
Yes, we do.
So the topic of this week's Future Imperfect, as we discussed last week, was Star Trek Discovery, kind of roundtable thoughts comparing it to other sci-fi like Battlestar Galactica and Mass Effect. We kind of hinted at this last week. We wanted to talk about starships this past week. We have the contemporary starships of today, like the SpaceX, the space shuttles and all that sort of thing, which is kind of neat, and kind of talking about space exploration in general, but obviously focusing on Star Trek ships like the Constitution class, the Defiant, my favorite ship, the Intrepid, and the Akira, and all sorts of ships in between. If it's been seen on screen, hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about it. I definitely want to send a shout out to the YouTube channel Lore Reloaded. There's also Trek Yards is another great Star Trek YouTube channel you can check out. And so those are guys you should be checking out. Once again, that's Trek Yards and Lore Reloaded for fantastic resources that I was able to access while researching some of the things that I want to talk about during this episode. But I guess we typically start things off seeing if we've been watching any Trek this past week. I unfortunately did not get a chance to watch anything except a bunch of YouTube videos, but I'm thinking about doing, if someone could give me the essential episodes to watch out of Star Trek, the original series, I think it's something I wouldn't mind doing, because supposedly out of the, how many episodes is there, Steve? There's 50 something?
There's 79.
79 episodes. If you could give me the top 25, I definitely watch them over the course of a month.
I think I can do that for you. I'm a connoisseur of the original series, so.
All right, so yeah, that might be something that we could definitely take on, because that's always been an empty spot in my Star Trek knowledge, is the original series. I've always been a TNG Voyager guy, and now I guess Discovery, having seen the complete first season of that. So, as always, send us feedback, which I'm pretty sure is. What is the feedback address for this show?
Well, I've been using feedback at alteredgeek.com. However, it might be actually beneficial to use the feedback at ussfutureimperfect.com.
Which is we're trying to get our own Starfleet chapter off the grounds. I've been putting off doing my Starfleet technical officers courses, so hopefully this weekend I'll get a chance to do that. I'll be the fastest promoted ensign in the history of Starfleet.
Me too.
Right now, I know I'm crewman something or other.
Crewman recruit. That's what I am too.
But you blow my ass away when it comes to doing all the courses. I just haven't had a lot of time.
I did 8 of them today.
Holy shit, Steve, get a life.
It doesn't take that long, actually, but the funny thing, I think I'm 50 plus classes deep now. I think I got 5 more left to do that are in my queue, God. And then I'm going to leave it alone for a while, but no, I've been having fun doing that, and then I've finally gotten pretty much all the ducks in a row for the chapter, other than I'm waiting on Optimus Solo to sign up to hit that number 5, and then waiting for the mentor ship that's supposed to kind of help us through this maiden voyage of the USS Future Imperfect, and then so that's about it, aside from your classes that you've got, the 2 or whatever, and then we get to file it and launch.
Yeah, so that's some exciting stuff coming up for the show, and just Starfleet in general, which, as we've kind of hinted at, and it's no secret, the fandom is in a weird state of flux right now. So I'm really hoping Starfleet sees a new influx of fresh blood, gets new ships launched, because I know there's been a bunch of ships decommissioned in the last little while, and I'm still a big fan of doing the whole Starfleet thing as being a member of Region 13. I'm the ship I'm on right now is the USS Hadfield, which is southern Ontario and I think parts of Michigan.
Yeah, it's Michigan, Southern Ontario, and there's like another area that kind of falls into that region. But yeah, I'm no longer a part of a ship. I resigned my commission on the Michigan chapter, but.
Well, you also decided to start your own, so I guess you're just waiting for your ship to come at a space dock, so to speak.
Yes, only this Constitution class ship has a holodeck and other advanced technology because it's 24th century grade.
You know what? You're basically the Star Trek equivalent. If you've ever seen the movie Periscope Down, they basically gave you the diesel sub, but instead you have a diesel Constitution class ship, which just happens to be refitted.
Yes.
So hey, in the 23rd century, we need all the help we can get from the Borg, the Dominion. Everybody's at our door saying, "Man, we want our piece too." So it'll be exciting. But I do like the fact you chose a classic ship as opposed to I'm going to be the Saber class, the Prometheus. You didn't just choose the coolest ship you could. You chose something classic and iconic.
And that's kind of part of it. It's iconic. Plus, it's got that nice nostalgia feel to it without being too updated.
Mm-hmm.
I could have gone with the original Constitution class, but I was like, it would be more fun to go with the Enterprise A style, the Enterprise 2 class heavy cruiser, and so it just makes it more fun. Plus, it's smaller than the larger ships, which means that we're a little bit harder to hit.
See, I would have went with the Ambassador class because that thing does not get nearly enough love.
See, that I've been thinking about that too. That would have been my second choice, only for the fact that I think that the Ambassador class has that nice evolution that unfortunately we only got one episode to see. Unless you play Star Trek Online, then you actually get to fly the ship. And it's the actual Enterprise C. It's another one of those Tholian scenarios, like what happened to the Defiant.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a nice evolution. I honestly like it a lot better than the Enterprise D design.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it kind of fits in with that. If you were to mix the original Constitution class and the Galaxy, that's what you would get.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I liked about the Ambassador class too. It has a retro futuristic look. It's a nice hybrid between the original series and TNG. Plus those warp nacelles just look kind of fucking cool.
The funny thing about it is that's not actually the original design of the ship.
Really?
Yeah, there's like a I think it's like a Probert or something like design that kind of came out before they used it in the episode, and it's got a lot more kind of funky, like almost Enterprise D functions to it that definitely got passed off to the Enterprise D.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a totally different design to some degree. Of course, they also had planned on coming up with a new design for the Enterprise A in the original Star Trek films, which was almost basically what we got for the Enterprise E.
Oh, okay. So when the Sovereign class, it was more elongated, more arrow-shaped, so to speak.
It was supposed to be more of a natural progression between the 1701 refit and the Enterprise B, which the Sovereign kind of is.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of interesting when I was going through the technical schematics website that you actually get to find very, very easily when you're taking schematics on all of the ships. I mean, they even have stuff on the Intrepid, the Defiant, the Enterprise, 01, A, B, C, D, E, on Starfleet Academy.
Mm-hmm.
So
now,
that may be something you may want to jump into when you get time, is like the Intrepid class and the Defiant and whatnot on there. You can do all the schematics, and they'll actually take you through you get to identify the sections of the ship. You get to kind of learn a little bit more about the class itself. It's actually quite informative because there were things I didn't even know about the Enterprise A that I've discovered while doing that.
There are parts of the Intrepid just by watching Voyager. I think I could pretty much walk the hallways of that ship and pretty much know where I'm going, which is a little sad and depressing. But you see, I was actually talking with my wife, Blair, about this tonight. I was watching all those Lore Reloaded videos tonight, and she was saying it all sounds like kind of gobbledygook. And I was about to say, one of the interesting things about Trek specifically is it's a very tech-based fandom, which basically, if you can describe the Intrepid class from its length to how many decks it has, to phaser emitters, to photon torpedo launchers, etc., it's no different than talking about a car.
Not really.
And I just kind of realized there's an interesting parallel us dorks can draw between Star Trek nuts and car nuts. You may know the inside of a Ford Mustang GT whatever. I can tell you what the Defiant can do, what the Sao Paulo differences are between it and the actual Defiant, stuff like that. Was the ship designed for killing Borg or whatever? And I found that very interesting because I'm actually reading through another series, another sci-fi property, which is very, very tech heavy. And that's the MechWarrior / Battletech franchise, which is nothing but stats. Where you look at different clan mechs, you might look at different inner sphere mechs, different eras and stuff like that. And I, once again, started thinking about Star Trek. When you start to look at some of these ships when they were designed, were they designed in the 23rd century or the 24th century? For example, one of the videos I was watching tonight was talking about the Sovereign class and when it was designed. And it seems like it came from conception to design to completion in a relatively short order amount of time. And then you look at another series of ships which was it designed during the border wars with the Cardassians, which is I think the 2340s to the 2360s, more or less, in their 2370s or whatever. And you can kind of track when the Federation kind of moved away from science and exploration. Obviously, after the disastrous battle of Wolf 359, their first real attempt was the Defiant, and
it failed actually.
Yeah, it moth. They're like, this thing sucks. But then Cisco pulled it out of mothballs when he started fighting the Dominion. Plus, the writers wanted a reason to get. We have to go somewhere, guys. We're Star Trek. We have to go somewhere. So they wanted to give them a ship, and as people referred to it as Ben Sisko's pimp hand, which it is.
Yes. Even though the first one got destroyed, they pulled a Kirk and gave him this like an upgraded version of the same ship and slapped an A at the end of it.
Yeah, and it even had things like a cloaking device which was on loan from the Romulans, stuff like that. It had a blade of hull armor. So this thing could do amazing things. And the ship's, like I said, original design was to kill Borg. But you look at how it was designed. This thing was not designed as one ship to take on a Borg cube. Because we saw it got its ass kicked, despite what you all might think in First Contact. It was designed to work alongside other ships that had more firepower. Or
it was supposed to be a support class.
Yeah, exactly. It was meant to be like a fighter that just happened to be the size of a full-size starship. Because I think the Defiant, it's less than 150 meters long and definitely less than that wide. So it's not exactly the biggest starship in the fleet. It's probably one of the smallest. Stuff like that. It only has like 5 or 6 decks, I think.
See, the thing I like is it inspired something in Star Trek Online, and I'm kind of showing my hand here of my Star Trek Online knowledge as well. The funny thing is the Sovereign class could go toe-to-toe with the Borg rather easily, and then you look at the Defiant and it can't. Well, in Star Trek Online, there's this ship called the Aquarius, and it's another of that similar size, but it looks like the USS Jenolan almost, with the ship that Scotty was on in Relics, and it has the capability to cloak too. However, it's a small starship that actually plugs into the back of the Enterprise F.
Interesting.
It's the Enterprise F is an Odyssey class ship, which is even bigger than the Sovereign class. But it's got more. It's basically, if you mixed the Galaxy class and the Sovereign class, you get the Odyssey class. But the Odyssey class looks so much more sleek and smooth designed. It clearly could be for combat, or it could clearly like just be for our exploration. Like it's got the look for both. But it's got this battleship that can launch out of the back of the ship in this. There's like this plating between the saucer section and the main hull. Mm-hmm. Kind of like the Enterprise D has, where it can do a saucer separation as well, but the ship can kind of fit in there.
One of the things I actually found kind of interesting, rather, is looking at certain designs of Starfleet, is you look at the change in the philosophy of how their starships were designed, because I know you mentioned specifically the Sovereign class and how it could go toe-to-toe with the Borg. Some of the videos I've watched have suggested that the Sovereign class was not actually designed with the Borg in mind, more like the Dominion War. Because after a refit, it was noticed that ships, because the Sovereign class is so big, if you got in behind that thing, you could pound the crap out of it and essentially do significant damage. After a refit, it was a lot harder to take down. They put a lot more phaser banks and torpedo launchers into it. So I think it's interesting how Starfleet's mandate changed, because in the 23rd century it was very much science and exploration, because you'd have classes like the Oberth and the Miranda class, I think. Yep. More like the Oberth, that were science only vessels, and you'd have, even in the 24th century, like the Nova, the Nebula class, which basically they were science vessels.
And the Voyager and the Intrepid class.
Yeah, like the Voyager is meant to be a deep space exploration vehicle, although when you look at the Intrepid, you kind of wonder how it survived so long without being resupplied. But that's another thing to actually even talk about these ships. You look at the logistics of how Starfleet's Navy works, stuff like that. And like I said, I do find it interesting just how Starfleet, after it got its ass kicked after 359, and then the Dominion War, they started building ships for war. We had the Defiant, the Prometheus class. At the time when it was launched, the Intrepid was one of its most advanced ships. And it could stand up fairly decent in a fight, though it still had a science mission profile in mind. One ship we haven't even talked about is the Galaxy class, which was the Enterprise D, which had the distinction of having families on board, which is interesting because you look at the Enterprise D was the Federation's flagship, so it's meant to go to make first contact. It was modular in its design, the fact that it could have several decks and laboratories equipped for different mission profiles. So, say, exobiology, astrocartography, etc., etc. And there were families living on board. Like the fact that you could have Captain Picard walking down the same deck as the guy who works in the cafeteria, or a guy who might work in a public library.
Or the haircut guy.
Yeah, or even, the barber, I think his name was.
Yep.
Stuff like that. That's fascinating, and also a major blunder on Starfleet's behalf, in my opinion. Yes, it's great to have Federation be this mission of peace, mission of exploration and diplomacy, but to put families in the way of that, I mean, to have Starfleet officers serve with their families, that's nice and all, but I don't want my wife and kids next to me while I'm fighting the Borg. We saw how well that worked out for Benjamin Sisko.
Well, and I think that the fact that the Galaxy class, I mean, you even had the Excelsior class fighting in that battle, and it got mopped. And you look at the fact that the Galaxy class, I think that it would have got mopped too if it weren't for the fact that they had capable commanders helming the ships. and the fact that, too, after Viridian 3 with the Nexus, you pretty much didn't see families on starships anymore.
Which is definitely good, because Starfleet in that time, because the Dominion War was starting to heat up or starting to happen, really, Starfleet realized we have to be a more of a military organization, and you saw that design with their ships. You look at something like the Akira class, which was rumored to be in development as early as the 2340s, I think. Do not quote me on that, but we didn't see it until the 2370s. So you start to see a more interesting mission profile pop up with these different ships. Like I said, you had the Akira class, the Saber class, the Prometheus, which is a ship built specifically for war, with its multi-vector attack mode. The fact that it could take down those big-ass Romulan ships in like 2 or 3 hits and not break a sweat.
Which was insane.
Yeah, which is nuts. I mean, even a Galaxy-class starship, which is one of the largest in the Federation fleet, next to the Sovereign class, yeah, good luck. I mean, we saw several episodes of TNG where they're fighting these Romulan warbirds, and the Enterprise is like, hey, man, we're in some trouble here. And you look at the episode where they featured the Prometheus, for example, they sent two Defiant class and an Akira class. The Akira class was meant to kick the crap out of 3 Romulan warbirds. So that should tell you the Starfleet's military designs. They were getting ready. They were ramping up to protect their own assets and obviously protect the galaxy against the Borg, the Dominion, whatever threats happened to come knocking on the front door. And I find that interesting, how Starfleet was never meant to be a military, yet all it takes is a couple of big instances for them to completely shift away from it. Because you would know this better than I don't know how many science-only vessels started coming out after the canon stuff that you'd see on TV and in movies.
Yeah, there really weren't that many science class vessels that came out. They were pretty much all like multi-use, pretty much space exploration, but war assault vehicles. Yeah,
and obviously the galaxy is a very dangerous place because we don't know. Obviously, the Dominion War has been dealt with. The Borg are a diminished threat at best. We don't know what their state is. I don't consider the books to be canon.
I do consider Star Trek Online to be canon, though.
Yeah, because if it's written by people at Star Trek and they say it's canon, then who are we to argue?
Plus, stuff it like interconnects between all of the different generations, between Archer, Kirk, everything, and then beyond into the 28th century. So you get a lot of time travel in that game, which adds to the storyline, and it kind of fills in a lot of gaps that are kind of hanging out there. But the Borg really, they play a pretty decent role, but there's a lot that happens after the destruction of Romulus that kind of plays into ship designs with the Species 8472, with the fact that the Breen attack after the Dominion War. Then there's the Klingon Federation alliance kind of breaks down, and then they're kind of battling each other again, like they were in the 23rd century. So it's kind of a touchy situation timeline until they start fighting the Iconians, which is just insane. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of influx of certain types of ships depending on the situation, but there's definitely a lot more war-styled vehicles of starships.
Now, one of the things I did mention talking at the beginning of this episode is I wanted to mention about our space flight that we have. Now, you kind of look at how Star Trek has kind of influenced it. One of the neat things, and it's not something a lot of people really think about, is people wonder, why don't we have Star Trek ships now? Obviously, warp drive being a big thing, why don't we have that? Because can we reach the speed of light? Maybe. People have theorized warp engines are possible. stuff like that. But one big thing people don't talk about necessarily is space is full of deadly-ass radiation. And that's one thing Star Trek has solved, because right now our best protection against radiation, it's water. Oddly enough, is a really good insulator. And so is lead. Stuff like that. That's why spacesuits are lined with it. When you go to get an x-ray at the doctor's office, you have a lead-lined vest on your chest.
Yep.
To protect you from deadly x-rays.
What I find funny with SpaceX specifically is the fact that their new shuttles which have replaced the standard NASA shuttles, because they're kind of using these now in place of NASA, is the fact that they kind of go off like almost like a cross between a Star Wars ship, one of the old 70s space shuttles, and like the ones that look like airplanes, but it's also got kind of that almost USS Phoenix, Zephyr Cochrane look to them, and the extra rockets actually propel themselves and land back on Earth.
Yeah, it's really neat how automation has become a huge part of space exploration now, and in Star Trek specifically, we see it with the isolinear chips, the computer cores, the bioneural gel packs. Voyager's a ship that can get sick. And that's really future predicting, because they're talking about biocomputers. They're talking about quantum computing now. Stuff like that. There's so much advancing in automation, artificial intelligence. There's smart ships, stuff like that. We have self-driving cars now, which are very much being tested out, I think, in California right now. Uber has, I think it was Uber anyway.
Well, General Motors actually is going to have their own Uber service, which is all automated cars. So where you just basically you call for a General Motors Uber, and it will come give you transportation, and then it'll go park itself back where it goes, or go to the next customer.
Which I think is really, really cool. The fact that we do have that. They're talking about automating big truck drivers. So instead of these truck drivers driving 18-hour days or whatever long it is, they're just going to have automated big rigs. The future is now. The future is realistically happening. And Star Trek paved a really good way for that. You look at how advanced some of these space probes are that are being launched now, and you look at the stuff from the 60s and 70s that's still out there. Hell, Voyager is still transmitting to a limited degree. I think we can send telemetry once every 18 days or something. I don't know. But I know it's like the farthest man-made object because it's in the heliosphere now, I think. Once again, don't quote me on that. My space exploration stuff, I'm really, really rusty on. But when I think about all the advances that will come in the future of space exploration, when we can have a vehicle that can take us to Mars, that can potentially land there, or we can send supplies in advance. Because that's one thing Star Trek has talked about, but it's very much in a fantasy element, is, oh, what are we going to do for food and water? Oh, that's the replicator or the food dispenser. It just makes stuff out of thin air, or it uses components to make a cup of coffee or to make a hamburger or whatever. Yet you can always tell it's replicated food. There's an off taste to it. You just know, because they do mention that with a couple lines of dialogue in a few episodes of, I think, Voyager and even TNG. They kind of mention it.
Well, even Scotty's like, this isn't scotch, and they're like, well, no, it's synthahol or whatever. And he's like, I was drinking scotch, blah, 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 because it was all synthetic. And then Picard's got his own stash of actual, like, whiskey under there, and then offers it to Scotty, and he's like, man, this is the good stuff.
It's kind of neat to think about. We're actually thinking about doing that, because now we can literally grow synthetic beef, which is weird when you think about it, or we can grow food out of sewage.
Well, they can actually turn vegetables into, because like our household is like primarily vegetarian for the most part. Like, I mean, I still eat meat, but it's not usually in the house. But they actually make this meat that's made out of vegetables that tastes and looks just like meat, even though it's not meat.
See, I tried going vegetarian for a month. My God, I don't know how you people do it.
Well, there's good vegetarian and there's bad vegetarian. You gotta know what you're getting into.
Oh my God, this was like eating friggin' shoe leather. It was disgusting.
Yeah, there's some that's like that. There's some that's not, though.
But Star Trek really kind of talked about the logistics of space travel. They thought about what supplies are going to need to bring with us. They even talked about holograms and holosuites, and that's not just a plot device where Professor Moriarty can take over the ship. No, because the chances of someone going nuts in space are very, very realistic.
Well, that's why they have so many recreation rooms and holodecks, especially on the Enterprise D, because, you know, that far in the future, everybody's like, you know, that deep in exploration. I mean, look at Kirk's time. Look how many times everybody kind of just lost it and kind of got on each other's nerves because, you know, they had, you know, when they wanted shore leave, they had to physically go to a planet to get away from everything. Whereas in TNG, yeah, they have shore leave chances where they can go to a planet, you know, off and on, but if they really need to get away or they really want to do something, you know, whether with their friends on the ship or just in general, just to kind of unwind, they've got the holodeck and they've got the recreation rooms.
Yeah, I mean, like space, like it's always been talked about in movies, but space madness, stuff like that. I know people on the International Space Station, they got to be very selective in what they bring up. I mean, it's not like you're bringing your whole library with you. I mean, obviously with the advent of things like the iPad, you can bring up a lot more data, which means you can literally bring a library with you.
Well, think about it a few years ago. These guys are cramped in this space, you know, space station, quote unquote, because I would much rather get stranded on like Space Station K7 or something like that over what or DS9 than what we've got floating in orbit. But they, a few years back, and I'm not sure how many years ago this was, but it happened. They had the astronauts on this ship kind of revolt against NASA. They shut off their communications for 24 hours as kind of a boycott because they were working them around the clock and giving them no break or no chance to unwind. So they were just getting like really high strung. So they shut it off and just had like a free day, which helped them unwind and brought back their ability to work.
And that's something important to think about in space travel too, is mental health. I mean, it's one of the things that doesn't get talked about. And you think about, once again, the talk about Starship design, you look at sick bay and you look at let's talk about the Intrepid class, how it had a Mark I EMH, which was meant to serve as a short-term replacement should the medical staff become incapacitated. That's, once again, far thinking, because if you get hurt on the space shuttle, you're kind of screwed. Like, unless there's a doctor on board and you have a fully staffed medical bay, you are doggone gone.
Well, even look at Voyager.
To help.
They had a moment when, granted, it was kind of a dream sequence, but where the doctor had created this emergency command hologram protocol to take command when the captain was incapacitated and the senior crew was incapacitated. So it was just him and 7 of 9 fighting against the Borg. I mean, granted, it was a dream sequence, but still, like, the fact that they eventually turned that into a reality of giving him that ability to extend his programming.
Yeah, and once again, that comes around to artificial intelligence, synthetic intelligence, because I think the moment is called the singularity, where the computer can literally think for itself and become self-aware. I think that moment's coming sooner as opposed to later. And I'm not talking the Matrix or Skynet or the Terminator is going to happen. But eventually, there's going to become a moment in technology where we're going to give birth to a new sort of life. And you look at the internet, you look at the quantum computing stuff that's happening now, the experiments in all these labs around the world. It's going to happen. And when that gets applied to space travel, it's going to be a fascinating moment, just being able to take in the wonders of the universe with another life beside us that isn't like our own. It'll literally be that companion to us. And that's something Star Trek has shown us with episodes like Measure of a Man, multiple Voyager episodes exploring the Doctor's humanity, stuff like that. It's going to be really, 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 really cool just to see what's going to happen. And Star Trek does give me very much a hope for the future of space exploration. I sincerely hope we never see space warfare. I mean, I've read enough BattleTech to know the future of space warfare does not look pretty. I've also played Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. Think of that what you will.
Well, I've played Unreal Tournament.
Yeah, I don't want that. I really don't want weapons that can pierce the hull of a starship and I get sucked out through space or God knows what else. I don't want to think about space warfare. Sadly, I know someone in the news not too recently said it's going to happen in a few years. We're going to have to think about space warfare, which I sincerely hope not. Because I think, well, obviously, we're still a long way off from phasers and photon torpedoes, but we do have laser weapons. They're just highly experimental. We have railguns. Honestly, I think the future of warfare in space is going to look a lot more like BattleTech as opposed to Star Trek.
Or like Star Wars.
Or like Star Wars, yeah. It'll be high-focus laser weapons and certain ballistic weapons. But I don't think we're going to have tri-cobalt devices. It'll be probably more like Battlestar Galactica. It'll be traditional ballistic weapons and nukes.
And I think that's why it's interesting to think of this entire creation that Gene Roddenberry came up with in the 60s, because, again, it was when society was in turmoil that he came up with this and created this sense of hope of what our future could be.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting right now because you look at all the upheaval happening around the world right now. Politically, it's a very interesting time to be alive, with no matter what side of the political spectrum you happen to fall on. One thing can be said for certain. Change is coming, and you better be ready for it, whichever way you want to fall, whether it be good, bad, or something else entirely. I think where we take the technology will definitely determine where we go from here, like our destiny. Obviously, people like Elon Musk are exploring privatizing space, but he also wants to open it up to everybody. At least that's how I feel. And even your president, Donald Trump, think of him what you will, wants to invest in space too, in some capacity.
Well, it's kind of the genius thing to do at this point, because not only are we destroying our own world, but there's also the fact that there's so much unknown.
Well, yeah, there. There's asteroids, there's planets,
and they've been speculating on things for close to 100 years of what they think's out there and how far things are. Wouldn't it be nice to actually go out and test that theory?
Exactly. I mean, there's so many cool things we could discover, so many wonders. There could be life in our own solar system on places like Io and stuff like that, the moons of Jupiter, the moons of Saturn, stuff like that. There's natural resources out there we haven't even begun to use that could be used back here on Earth. I mean, the ideas of space colonies in the next 100, 200 years is not unrealistic. In fact, it's fairly plausible. Just can we get our heads out of our ass long enough to actually make it happen? And there's another thing about Star Trek. You talk about star bases. You talk about Deep Space Nine, stuff like that. Long-term space habitations that have artificial gravity. There's something else Star Trek has kind of predicted. Artificial gravity, no big thing. Stuff like that. Easy transport to and from a planet's surface. Can we do the transporters? Well, I think they've transported a molecule across a room, so I think something's happening with that, if it's to be believed. I
Well,
personally can't say anything about it.
I've read that, and I honestly believe that they've done that.
Mm-hmm.
However, the fact remains that it also disintegrated when it came back.
Yeah, I'm not eager to try this.
No, but look at Captain Archer's timeline. He's almost 100, 170 years, 160 years from this point, and maybe 150 years at this point. But anyways, it's still, the transporter was still highly new and used for freight shipping, and not for people per se. Although they had made it work on occasion, and they just tried not to use it. But it still, it wasn't a very trustworthy technology, and even in the 23rd century it was not foolproof, because I mean there was the episode The Enemy Within where they split Kirk into good and evil half, and then you had a lot of various transporter malfunctions. You get the motion picture where the original first officer was going to be transported, and he was disintegrated in the pattern buffer. And then you look at every other series, you get Space Ghosts and TNG and the transporter buffer, and so it just kind of, there's a lot of problems with the technology, as opposed to taking a warp speed space car.
Yeah, exactly. I'd much rather do that, take a shuttlecraft, as opposed to a transporter. It just seems safer. I'm kind of with Lieutenant Barclay on this. The transporter's murder, and I don't trust it.
Well, and McCoy was the same way.
Yeah, I don't trust it. No way, no how.
Scattering my atoms all across the galaxy, and
I mean, it's once again one of those things you don't necessarily think about. But I guess what more can we really say about the ships of Star Trek? There's some tremendously cool ideas. They've thought about logistics. They've thought about mental health. They've thought about your physical health, weaponry, in terms of the battlefields of the future. They even have literally apartment buildings in space. When you look at the Enterprise D with the families on board, barbers, guys that work at the cafeteria, garbage men to probably an extent. Hell, to think about that, there's literally, you know what? I kind of wonder if Roombas have been replaced in the future by literal janitors still, because hey, someone's got to take up the garbage.
Yeah, they never talk about that.
So if you know the answer, is there a Star Trek garbage man and not just a baryon sweep? I'm very curious to hear that, because someone's got to clean the carpets on the Enterprise. So
who takes the blood out of the carpet?
Exactly. Somebody must have the OxyClean of the future. But what is your favorite starship? What's your least favorite? What do you think is the coolest design element of a ship? My favorite ship, like you didn't see this one coming, is the Intrepid. But honestly, the Oberth is a close second, because it is a science vessel. I like that. Why it was fighting the Borg at several different occasions is beyond me, but it looks cool. I like it.
See, for me, I obviously am very partial to the Constitution refit Enterprise 2 heavy cruiser class, which is the Enterprise A. One, because I saw it as a child on The Undiscovered Country like a million times. Two, I just love the sleekness of the ship. I mean, you have the design aesthetics of the original ship, along with the new like kind of blue on the deflector dish area, the kind of more detailed saucer section, and I love the nacelles, the designs on them. By far one of my favorite nacelle designs that they ever used in Star Trek. And so when I got to kind of pick ships, and I actually have the Micro Machine version from the little tiny ships that they had that were like 2-inch long, from way back in the 90s. of the Enterprise refit. Plus, I have the Hot Wheels one that came out, I don't know, about like 8 years ago, sitting on my desk. And so, like, I love that ship. And then if I had to kind of choose another one, I love the parts of the Ambassador class and, like, the Excelsior class. But I like a lot of design aesthetics of multiple ships. But a close second for me would be the Star Trek Online exclusive, like, Enterprise F, the Odyssey class. Just because it's like a bigger behemoth, it takes cues from a lot of various Enterprise ships and pieces them together. It's a very sleek design. I just like it. It's like if you took the Galaxy class and the Sovereign class and, like, it almost doubled it in size. it's freaking huge. But I really like those designs. But yeah, it's kind of interesting to figure out which ones are favorites and which ones are not. Like, I can't honestly pin one that I hate, because I really don't hate any design. They each serve a purpose. It's just figuring out which one kind of looks cool for what it does.
I was always partial to the Nebula class, too, because it was basically just the Galaxy class saucer section, but I always just thought it looked cool.
It almost kind of reminds me of the Miranda class.
Yeah, it's like a bigger buffer. It's like if it had, like, a bigger brother, so to speak.
Yeah, like the 24th century version.
But anyway, I guess that's pretty much going to do it for this edition of Future Imperfect. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed joining us as we kind of ramble on. I know we probably got a few things wrong. That's what Star Trek dorks do. We debate, we talk, we get things right, we get things wrong, but we always want to hear from you. You can comment on this website post. You can email us at
feedback@ussfutureimperfect.com.
We also encourage you to consider joining our ship once we get things off the ground. I'm sure Steve will be talking about that more in the weeks and months to come. We should be launching, hopefully fairly shortly. As soon as we get Optimus Solo on the show.
Yes.
So what do we want to talk about next week there, Steve?
Hopefully we get some comments and suggestions. That would be really nice. I don't really know. Maybe some of our favorite moments of the Doctor.
I like that. That's definitely something I think we could talk about. So next week we'll talk about Robert Picardo as his portrayal as the EMH from Star Trek Voyager. A fantastic guy. I actually had a chance to interview a couple of years ago. So be sure to be checking in with us next week. So until next time, we have been
Steve Megatron Phillips.
I've been Mike the Birdman Dodson. Live long and prosper.